Thanks for joining us today at our annual Business Leaders event. While we miss having this event in person, we're so thankful that we still have the technology to enable us to connect with you. I am Anita Chi, a financial planner in the private wealth division of Ronald Blue Trust. Ronald Blue was founded with an uncommon mission. And 40 years later, with over 9,000 clients and 16 branch offices across the country, we're still committed to applying biblical wisdom and technical expertise to help our clients make wise financial decisions. We're so excited to host this forum to address a topic that we're very passionate about, and that's mission. And specifically, we'll be talking about how to avoid mission drift. But before we go any further, I'd like to invite David Hogan of Ronald Blue CPAs to lead us in the opening prayer. David?
Good morning. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It is an honor for us to be able to partner with Ronald Blue Trust to bring this to you today. Let's pray. Lord, we are thankful for your provision. We're thankful for all the ways you bless our lives. Lord, I want to pray a special blessing over all the ministry and business leaders we have as we do our best to navigate the reality we find ourselves in. We pray for Peter and pray your blessings over him, not only today as he brings us an important message, but over his ministry and his work every day. Lord, bless our time. We are so thankful for the technology that allows us to continue to meet. Pray your protection over us and our health. Pray that the technology would work perfectly. Thank you for all your blessings. Bless our time together today. We are honored to be together, and we love you and submit this time to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
We are so honored to have Peter Greer joining us, but one quick housekeeping item. There will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please type any questions you have in the Q&A box right at the bottom of your screen, and we'll plan to address them during that segment. So we have Peter today. He is the president and CEO of Hope International, a global Christ-centered economic development organization that serves throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. Prior to joining Hope, Peter worked internationally as a microfinance advisor in Cambodia and in Zimbabwe, and as a managing director of a local bank in Rwanda. He received his bachelor's degree in international business from Messiah University and a master's in political and economic development from Harvard's Kennedy School. Peter has co-authored several award-winning books, including Mission Drift, which was selected as a 2015 Book Award winner from Christianity Today, Rooting for Rivals, which was selected as a 2019 Leadership Resource of the Year by Outreach Magazine, and The Spiritual Danger of Doing Good, just to name a few. Peter lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with his beautiful wife, Laurel, and their 4 amazing children. With that, Peter, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Anita. And it is great to be with all of you again. And I'm one of those people that definitely wishes that we could be together in person, but this allows us to connect. And especially this year, I am so thankful for any way that we're able to connect. And so thank you to the Ronald Blue Trust. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you. And this topic of mission drift is something that I have been passionate about for a number of years, but I have seen a particular need to have this conversation right now in the midst of all of the changes, all of the turbulence of 2020. So I am absolutely not assuming that anyone has kind of heard of the book or read it. So I'm going to do a general overview of some of the things that we found in our research about what contributes to mission drift. But then I'm going to share a little bit about some of the ways that these principles, I believe, are particularly important this year in the midst of all of the changes. And then most importantly, I'm looking forward for this to be a conversation with you. So again, the Q&A function at any point throughout, and I really am looking forward to turning this into a conversation and seeing what it is about this conversation on mission drift that will be helpful for us to focus on in our time remaining. I also have to say that when I think about organizations that have taken steps to actively prevent mission drift that the Ronald Blue Trust, what Russ, what the team has done to make sure that the mission is clear, that the mission is in cement, and to make sure that there is a strong foundation. I have the highest level of admiration, appreciation for what the leadership has done to take this issue seriously. And I just am honored to spend time. Also, sure, I'm grateful. Chris and I have been friends, and Evan and David Campaign has been our family's financial advisor and friend throughout this journey. So I just have the utmost respect for this group, and I'm just honored to spend a few minutes together. So this conversation about mission drift, it really started for me several years ago when I was in Houston, and I work for a nonprofit, as you heard, called Hope International. We do economic development around the world. We were founded with not just the mission to alleviate physical poverty, but also to alleviate spiritual poverty and to partner with the global church in the way that we implement our mission. And as I was in Houston, there was a foundation. It was a foundation of a publicly traded company. And this foundation was excited about the work that we were doing. They were excited about the geography and the places where we work. But at the end of this meeting, they said, Peter, there's one thing. You keep talking about your spiritual mission. You keep talking about Jesus. They said, downplay that. Just promise us that you're gonna not talk about that, and then we will be able to come alongside you in a significant way. And at that moment, they were looking at a 7-figure check, a multi-year pledge, and this would have been transformational for Hope International. But looking back, I don't think I realized just how transformational that gift would have been, and not in the ways that I saw or anticipated. We said, thank you very much. And we're going to do a little bit of research. We didn't give them a yes or no at that moment, but we ended up starting a research project that took several years to look at this issue of mission drift and what contributes to it. And although funding is one dynamic, there are so many others. And as we started digging into this, what we realized is that our mission in the way that we do it, there simply is no price that is worth compromising our mission. There is no amount of scale or growth that is worth walking away from the core of who we are. And so we ended up saying no to that funding opportunity, but yes to a research project that allowed us to understand the reality and prevalence of drift. And it has changed the trajectory of my life. It has changed the way that I lead. And it has opened up all kinds of doors of conversation about what it takes to stop this well-worn path of drift. And as we started digging into this issue of mission drift, we found the examples of drift are absolutely all around. One of the most interesting ones was this example. And I wish that we could kind of be in person and could engage more directly with you to see who knows who this individual is. But this is a saint born in 270 AD in Turkey, and he is known as Saint Nicholas. And my guess is the story of Saint Nicholas, how he known as this benefactor, generosity, and the climbing up and putting the coins in the stockings, and a leader in the early church. But did you know that Saint Nicholas is also the patron saint of pawn shops? And maybe you're wondering, why in the world do pawn shops have a patron saint? But even the logo of pawn shops, it harkens back to that time of Saint Nicholas and those 3 purses that he ended up doing, some believe. And so why in the world do pawn shops have a patron saint? Why in the world do pawn shops have this connection to Saint Nicholas? And the reality is that pawn shops were created as a tool of the church to care for individuals in their moment of need. They were founded by the Franciscans, and there is a rich history of how pawn shops were used by the church to help for individuals in their moment of need. Even 1512, Pope Julius II has this edict endorsing pawn shops as an effective poverty alleviation tool of the church, the Montes Pietatis. He said, this is a way to help the poor. Now, how many of you today, when you drive by a pawn shop, get this warm feeling in your heart, similar to the feeling that you have on Christmas morning, the other time we celebrate St. Nicholas, and say, what a good outreach of the church to care for for people in their moment of need. No, today there is no connection between the founding story, the founding purpose, the reason why they were created, and the practices today. And while that might be an egregious example of a church ministry that cares for the poor, the examples are not limited to ancient history books. There's a question that has just fascinated us, and it's this question of, so what causes that? What causes organizations to drift from their founding purpose and passion? And what we found is it is a series of small steps that in the moment seem almost impossible to identify, that in the moment, it's almost impossible to say, yes, that is something that's contributing to mission drift, because they are small, they are seemingly inconsequential, and yet it's only when we have the gift of perspective and time that we see how the accumulation of small decisions actually lead to an organization wandering, drifting, or staying true to the mission, to the passions, to the reason why a business, a nonprofit, a church, a charity, whatever, why it was created to exist. And so I think the question for all of us is not, is there drift happening within our organizations, but do we have the courage, do we have the eyes to see it and to take active steps to prevent it? And just one real quick thing, this is not an argument against change. This is simply an argument against drift, the changes that happen without thought, without prayer, without attention. It's saying this issue of drift causes us to move away from our founding passions and purposes without even recognizing that we're drifting. So I want to share real quick 3 big picture ideas of what we found that were consistent with every organization that either drifted or remained true. There were 2 different paths to take. And the first of those organizations that remain on mission, multi-generations, the first piece was they believe that drift happens. When we started having conversations and we interviewed leaders across sectors, across industries, trying to understand what did they do, the first thing that came up is they were not surprised by this conversation of mission drift. They already understood that it was a reality. They already understood that it happens. They already understood that the path of least resistance is a path of drift. And I think back to when I was taking my son to the beach. We love going as a family. In the summer, we love going and we love playing in the waves. And there was this one day in particular with our family. And my son and I, at the time, he was about 10, we were playing in the waves. And it was one of those perfect days where there's a storm brewing and the waves are big. And as we walked on the beach every single day, we saw these signs of different warnings and we never paid any attention to them. We are playing out, and within a matter of moments, I had one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. My son was caught in a riptide and he was pulled out fast. And I've never felt more helpless. I could not get to him, no matter how hard I tried. And watching the look of absolute panic on my 10-year-old son's face as he's being pulled out and I am unable to get to them, that was one of the most fearful moments of my entire life. There actually was a lifeguard that was aware of the reality of riptides, jumped in and ended up saving him and bringing him back. And I tell you, I will never walk by one of those signs that say, warning, riptide. I will never walk by one of those signs again in the callous way that I did before. And in a similar way, I will never look at an organization, nonprofit, for-profit, that is mission-driven, and I will never walk by and say, you know what, there's no danger there. For all of us, there are currents, and we would be so wise to pay attention to those currents because we act, we lead, we serve, we respond differently when we understand that we are living in a world of currents. And if you're not convinced on the reality of drift, let me just give you a couple more examples of this. But there was a well-known institution of higher education that had this as one of its founding mission statements, to be plainly instructed and consider well that the main end of your life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ. This mission statement is well documented. It is in the history books. It actually is etched in stone. If you go to Cambridge, Massachusetts, you will see all kinds of things etched in stone that harken back to the founding mission and purpose of this institution that is known as Harvard. And its mission was clear. It wasn't just to be a place of higher education. It was a place for individuals to grow in their understanding of God and who they are created to be. And even on the seal, it says veritas, which means truth. And then it says Christo et ecclesia, so truth. And then it says for Christ and the church. It is in the logo, and yet it is not in the classroom today. And again, this is not saying that there's not wonderful work that's happening. It's not saying there's not wonderful things that are happening, but it's saying if you hold the Harvard of today with the Harvard of its founding creators, you will see a dramatic mismatch between those two. Interestingly enough, 100 years after the founding of Harvard, there was a group of individuals that said, we've got to do something. So they moved south. They created another institution of higher education. And they said, we're going to create this in such a way that we will not drift. And that is known as Yale University. And they said, it's not just veritas, but Luke's the light of Christ. And again, you look at the founding documents and their mission was clear. You look at the practices today, and it is hard to see how it is the same place. We are given the gift of history when we look back and see just how prevalent mission drift is. But we also see this woven throughout the pages of Scripture, that mission drift is the constant. Mission drift is the constant of the followers of God. And we see this Old Testament, we see this New Testament. And I think about Joshua 24, one of the boldest declarations about an anti-mission drift statement. When Joshua stands, they're going into the promised land, and he says, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. He makes this bold declaration that it wasn't just for him. It wasn't just that he was saying, I'm not going to drift. I am going to stay on mission. I know what God just did. I know the God that I serve. There is no way that I would forsake my God. And he makes this declaration, and my household won't either. The problem is that it's real hard to control the actions of future generations. And if you look in your Bible, you will turn 1 or 2 pages and you will see that mission drift happened even after this miraculous exodus. And just a couple pages later in the book of Judges, it says, after that whole generation, so after Joshua, after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. Again, the author's making sure that we understand just how egregious this mission drift is. This is the God who brought them out of Egypt, a band of slaves routing the most powerful nation on earth, ending up in a promised land. If anyone is going to be immune to drift, it's this group of people. They saw the miraculous. They saw the plagues. They saw the way that God provided for them when they were wandering. They saw the pillar of fire. They had every reason to understand that God is real. And yet the grandchildren of that generation ended up not just drifting a little bit, but completely turning their backs on the God who had brought them out of Egypt. If that is true for them, if that is true in higher education, if that is true in Christian church outreach to those in need, maybe, just maybe, mission drift is an issue that we are facing right now as well. The pattern is that the passions of the first generation become the preferences of the second generation, and they become irrelevant to the third generation, unless we're willing to roll up our sleeves and say, I don't want that to be my story. I want my story to be a story of faithfulness. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. That's in my heart. I am prone to wander. I am prone to drift. But I don't want that to be my story. I do not want that to be my family story. I do not want that to be my church's story. I do not want that to be my organization or my business's story. So how do we stop drift? First thing, is we understand drift is a reality. We understand the reality of drift. A second thing is that because of that, we get real clear of saying, what is our mission? And just to be clear on this, but this is not saying that everything, all the means of how we operate, those are not the things that we need to have the crystal clarity of. Those are not the things that we need to have somehow, that we hope continue. But those small number of things that you would say, I would rather us fold than for these core things, to drift away from. And I say these few core things because I think that there is a number of the leading philanthropists that we read about in our history books that I believe wish that they had never received their funding if they were to know how their funds were being used today. And I say that with full confidence because we read a lot of the founding documents of some leading foundations and what they were passionate about. And then we contrasted them to what the organizations are giving to today. And it is diametrically opposed to them. So the organizations that didn't drift, they had this clarity of mission. But I was with a group of philanthropists as we were doing our research and I asked them, these are some of the individuals that I respect most and that have been so thoughtful in their philanthropy. But even today, as I met with them, none of them had documented their core purpose. None of them had a giving charter that clarified, here's what we want our funds to be used for. They just assumed that it was clear. And assumption is a dangerous proposition if you want to prevent mission drift. And one said, I guess I don't really like thinking about the time when I'll be gone. They didn't like thinking about this, and so they hadn't taken steps to document in a very clear and concise way, this is our mission. This is the clarity. They hadn't thought beyond themselves. They hadn't thought of the moment when they'll be gone. And maybe this is not happy conversation of a Thursday morning, but we're all going to be gone someday. For every single one of us, there will be a moment when our race is done. And have we prepared for that moment, both organizationally with our family and with the resources that we have as well? Philanthropy is riddled with examples where individuals had a passion in their life that was not clarified. It was not continued after their death, and mission drift in the world of philanthropy is all over the place. So what's it look like for us? How do we keep our founding purpose alive? And just as a real simple step, if you're a founder in particular, or if you're in leadership right now, if you have not clarified, these are the small number of things. I would rather go out of business than change in these small number of things. That could be a great thing to do. And maybe if you want to write a letter to your successors, a 50-year down the road successor, what are those things that you would want to articulate that says this is the reason why we exist? After Mission Drift came out, there was a YMCA that was doing a construction project, and we talk about YMCA as an example of an organization that today has drifted. And after the book came out, I got a call from a leader of the YMCA. And he said, Peter, I have to tell you something. And I was thinking, did we miss something in the book? Did we get something wrong? And he said, we were doing a construction project on our YMCA. And he said, we took down one of the walls and we found our original charter for our chapter of the YMCA. And he said, we read that and we absolutely wept because we realized that today, our emphasis on being a great health club was in misalignment with the full and holistic mission, the YMCA, the Christian aspect of who they were created to be. And he said, we're doing everything possible to get back to our founding purpose. And the reason is because someone a long time ago had taken care to say, this is our why. This is why we exist. And we're going to do everything we can to protect it. third area. So one is believe that drift is a real thing. Second is, have we had clarity about our mission? And then the third is, are we intentional in the big and the small decisions about making sure that the decisions that we make actually help us become a truer version of ourselves in the years to come? And this is all kinds of application, people, metrics, funding policies. There are so many different ways that we could go in saying this, but the big piece, the big takeaway for us was the intentionality in everything. To say, when we do a strategic plan, our mission is right in front of us. When we think about the way that we think about hiring and onboarding, our mission is right in front. When we think about what we measure, the metrics that we use, our mission is the lens that we use. And so it is an implementation of the small decisions through the lens of what matters most. So I think about people, and this example of Phil Vischer, who I think is one of the most remarkable business leaders, created VeggieTales, his parent company, Big Idea. And he is someone who talks so clearly about this issue of mission drift. And again, the reason why I think VeggieTales is such a fascinating example of drift, in his words, is because it seems like they should be immune to drift. I mean, the very company was set up so that they could bring God's word through vegetables in an entertaining way as an alternative to Saturday morning cartoons. And Phil Vischer stood up several years ago at his company meeting, over 200 employees at this time, and he stands up and he gives their why. He said, this is, at the end of the day, what we are all about. He talks about the full mission of VeggieTales. And at that moment, there was another individual who followed him. And this individual, Phil, as the founder, had hired someone to run the company with a wonderful resume, and yet a mismatch on mission, and stands up next and says, if that's what this is about, I need to opt out. From founder to the person who was CEO, the president who was running the company, there was a mismatch on the very purpose. And I believe this is because it's so easy to focus on resume and so easy to take for granted or to miss completely full alignment on mission. And this example from VeggieTales is an example that we see being played out in so many, that we look for the skills and we miss to have an equal or even more and greater emphasis on the heart alignment for purpose. I think also about this issue about the mission true companies realize that every single individual is only entrusted for leadership for a moment in time. And there's something wrong with both of these pictures. And it's pretty clear. You can see what's wrong in both these pictures. This is from the 2008 Olympics. And it was both the women's team and the men's team in rapid succession, one race shortly followed by the other, that both the men's and women's were leading contenders. And yet they missed the handoff. They missed the handoff. And you know what happens in a relay race when you miss the handoff. You don't win. You don't medal. You do not continue the race. You are disqualified. And in a similar way, I am convinced that when it comes to mission drift, the inability to have the handoff from one leader to the next, from one person over that department to another person over that department, if we do not get succession right, we are going to get mission drift as well. And so again, I just think about Russ and the example that he has in his leadership in the way of actively saying, I want to be the chief mission officer. I want to make sure that that baton throughout the organization is passed well. And I think for all of us, this issue of succession planning is mission critical. And yet, as Stephen Covey writes, it's probably in that quadrant of, we know it's really important, but it doesn't really feel urgent. Organizations that remain on mission think beyond their tenure. They think, act, plan beyond the time when they are in their roles. And I think about also board and governance. I think about metrics and certainly the ways that I got that wrong in my leadership. But I just want to close with a couple thoughts about why now is such an important time to have this conversation about mission drift, and then see what questions or where you want to go in the conversation. But I think about how right now, my experience is that the risk of mission drift is elevated in the midst of all of the disruption of 2020. And I think about this for three reasons. The first is the the spin on the bat principle. And I don't know if you did this at camp. This was something we did. I think we've done it at a couple of our kids' birthdays. It's kind of one of these cruel games, and you put your head down on the bat, you spin around 10 times, and then you try to run in a straight line. And you know what happens after spinning around 10 times. There is no way you are able to run in that straight line. You are falling down, and it's kind of a cruel game that we play with kids. But this year, with Hope International, just as one example, every single aspect of our operations has been disrupted. We operate in 16 countries. Every aspect has been disrupted, from operations to events to the way that we deliver our services. Everything that we did was group-based, and that has been massively disrupted. We have been pivoting and pivoting and pivoting. And I can't even take that word anymore of pivoting, but there have been so many changes that I think in the midst of all of this, it becomes even more difficult to say, what is our mission? I feel dizzy coming to the end of 2020 with all of the global disruption, all of the disruption that is here. And I think whenever we feel dizzy, it is harder for us to have that clarity. And I think the role of a leader right now in particular is to say, this is who we are. Beyond what we do, this is who we are. What does not change in the midst of 2020? And to keep that focus. The second reason why this year is so difficult is because funding is an issue. Funding is a big issue of drift. And I don't think this is just in the nonprofit space. Where we think and how we think about funding is mission critical. And this week we had a board meeting. And even this week, there were some funding opportunities that came to Hope that brought me back to where we started this presentation, back to Houston, and back to this conversation. And I think there is more of a tendency to say, how can we get the money that we need to grow, to do the work that we need in a way that causes us to slowly compromise our mission. And so just a heightened aware that whenever there's a feeling of more desperation leads to compromise. And so how can we make sure that we are not taking whatever it is of a feeling of desperation that causes us to make small compromises that, when compounded by time, will lead us astray. And the third piece is just, how do we make decisions? There's so many additional factors that we're weighing right now. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much pain that we're feeling in our journey. And goodness, would someone please tell me what 2021 is going to look like? Because I really need to know for my planning. And there's so much more uncertainty. And I just think about, I had a conversation with someone who spent his career in the Navy. And he said, Peter, here's the one thing that I know. Here's the one thing that my Navy experience has taught me. He said, when the waves are big, when the storms come in, when you can't see the sky, you got to trust your compass. You've got to trust the direction that you're going. You have to constantly be making adjustments. And when there's waves, there's more adjustments that you have to make, but you make them in light of what you believe. This is who we are. This is what the mission that God has given us. And we want to make all of our decisions in light of that. And so that is my hope, that as the waves, goodness, there just are a lot of waves this year that we are all feeling. But may we be leaders who make our decisions in light of the mission that God has given us. And when the history books look back at the work that you did, may they see an example of faithfulness, not another story of drift, but faithfully pursuing what God has created you to do. So that's my hope for all of us, that we would be leaders who have mission clarity and lead in a way that is mission true. Evan, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. A couple questions coming in. What are some examples of intentional practice that you have seen that are effective in preserving mission?
Oh man, there's so many. And So one of the things that I just would love to offer for anyone that is interested in this is we basically took all the kind of research from Mission Drift, created a Mission True manual. It's available for free. And again, maybe we could send the note out if anyone wants it, but it's just a way to download some of the exercises, some of the practices that Mission True leaders have gone through. And again, part of the challenge in even answering this question is because we found it's not just enough to do 1, 2, or 3 things. It is, are we doing all of the seemingly small decisions? So some of the small decisions. One, what's happening in your heart as a leader? Mission drift is not just an organizational issue, it is a personal issue. And so how can you make sure that as you are as a leader, that you're not drifting? Organizational drift is nothing more than a reflection of personal drift. So what can you do in your life? Second piece is there clarity on this? And again, is there a founding document? With our board meetings, we like to have a moment where the founder's intent is read. And I think about the Kroll Trust. We kind of copied that from them. Founder of Quaker Oats. That's something that they do, that they start their board meetings with reading the very words of Henry Kroll, who's died many years ago, but they want to make sure that they're continuing to do the work in that. So pay attention to the drift, get clear documents around what is our why do we exist? And I could go on governance issues and onboarding issues and how that changes. Metrics is a big one too. What do you measure? What do you celebrate? And is it growth? Or is it a little bit growth and the other elements of making sure that we're staying on mission? So I could go on, but I really would love to share for anyone that is interested that Mission True manual that might give some practical exercises that you can walk through.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Another question from Rob, a great question. Can you expand on metrics? Is this a financial? Is it personnel related, et cetera? So what do those metrics look like?
Yeah, thanks. And I don't know, again, I work in the nonprofit space. I know that there are some of you that are in the nonprofit space. I know there are a lot that are business leaders as well. So I think to figure this out in your space, but I can just tell you personally, when I joined Hope International, there were 2 metrics that mattered to me. There were only 2 metrics that mattered to me, and I had graphs on my wall. Number 1 was the size of our budget. How much money are we raising? Number 2 is how many people are we serving? Those are good and important metrics. Of course, if you believe in the mission of the organization, you want to grow your budget and you want to serve more people. But those 2 can be wildly misleading metrics. And I had the personal experience in several different times, and I would count them as some of my greatest failures in leadership, where a pursuit of growth without a focus on whether that growth is actually achieving our mission or not, whether we're implementing it with excellence or not, we got growth and we got a bigger problem that we had to clean up. We had to lay off 100 staff. We had to close multiple branch offices in this one country because we were pursuing growth without underlying health, or actually what is most important is the work that we're doing actually making a difference in the lives of the families that we serve. And so I have a little bit of a healthy skepticism, I hope, about growth as the primary driver of success. And so for you, what you measure matters. What you measure and what you celebrate within your organization will shape the decisions that are made. And again, for me, if my board is putting all of this pressure on me that growth is all that matters, I'm going to go after that funding that might be not missionally aligned. I'm going to feel that pressure. But if the leadership says, you know what, this is the way we think about it. Our mission matters most. We're going to operate with excellence and we're going to grow. It's a bigger picture. So for you, I would just ask, if you were to go and take a random sample of your employees and you were to say, what matters most? What would they answer? What are the metrics that matter most? And I think that conversation, having a bigger, it's, Robert, the balanced scorecard type approach, but implementing it with a mission true lens, I think could be helpful, of saying, if we measure this, what will we get? And is it possible for us to measure more than just growth and financial success?
Peter, another question. You mentioned that drift occurs over small periods of time along the way. And how might you suggest when a founder or a business leader identifies that, wow, we've really gotten off drift here, what are some one or two things that you immediately can do to start heading back to mission?
I mean, I think about the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 50 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. And so I wouldn't spend too much time beating yourself up on that. And I would rather focus on, so what do we do today? What do we do today if we sense that there is drift happening? And I think a big piece is if you just make all of these sweeping organizational changes, you're going to cause whiplash in the organization. And so there's a process to go through. And oftentimes it starts with just the storytelling of, you're not going to believe this, but I looked back. This is who we were created to be. And we want to do a project to dive into our story as an organization, our founders' intent. We want to learn this process, and we want to understand how we can continue to implement. So there might be something about starting with the storytelling, starting with the documentation of who we are, and then to very clearly, again, metrics are just so powerful to say, this is what we believe matters most. This is what we're going to go after. And when you make your next strategic plan, whether that's an annual or a multi-year kind of plan, that's a wonderful time to say we are going to be shifting our priorities. We're going to be shifting our capital allocation. We're going to be shifting the ways that we talk about our mission in the years to come. And this is where we're going. And I sure hope that you're on the journey with us. But there are instances that we have seen where there has been drift to such an extent that I think providing a very gracious way of saying, and if this is not in alignment with what you want to focus on, we also understand that as well. And so there in many examples when organizations are recalibrating, are setting the course in a different way, there are employees that opt out of that. And so again, best time 50 years ago, second best time today to start making those mission true decisions.
Very good. And I think we have one last question coming in, but as a founder, how do you balance preparing your company for like a liquidity event or a transition to the next generation versus, keeping that mission going?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I do feel like there are extra challenges for founders when it comes to this. There are extra challenges and there are extra opportunities. And I think when I've seen the founders that have done this most, it's there is so much grace, there is so much freedom, there's so much empowering of the next generation of leaders. And I like how Wes Stafford, when he left Compassion, he said, I've been on the stage. Now I'm going to the audience, but I'm going to be the biggest. I'm going to cheer the loudest for the new leadership team. And I love that image of going from there. I'm no longer on the stage, and any decisions that come to me about operations, I am going to trust and I'm going to empower that individual. And I am not going to undermine their credibility or their mission, but I am going to cheer loudly. And to intentionally tie the hands of the future successors in a very small number of very important ways. So again, Wes, he did something really interesting is he created in the bylaws of the organization before he transitioned, but that the primary purpose of the organization could not be changed without 3 consecutive years of 100% unanimous votes to change the primary purpose of the organization. So he ties the hands of the future leaders in a very small number of issues around core purpose and identity, and gives incredible freedom and flexibility with the means that individuals go and apply and implement the mission. So I guess that might be something to consider, is what are those small number of things that you matter most, and then to be incredibly open-handed and supportive. Obviously, if it is a sale or a liquidity event, that is a dramatically different set of conversations. I do think it's been fascinating to see the growing number of entrepreneurs that have been gifting their companies to foundations as a way of preserving mission and the assets to be used for their primary purpose. There's some really interesting examples. And if you haven't seen some of those examples, our founder just did that recently in a wonderful way. And I know he'd be happy to tell his story, but I think there's more and more creativity about how we can, even in a liquidity event, ensure that we're protecting the core mission as well through non-voting stock and some other creative means as well. So yeah, all kinds of creative ways to do that, even in that time of transition as well.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your mission drift application, and really appreciate this next segue into our fireside chat as you're going to participate with Chris Allen and Carrie Mallory.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks, Evan, and thanks, Peter. Always a joy to see you, even if it's virtual, and get to hang out. Well, in this next part of our time together, I know that some of you are kind of phoning in, dialing in, watching this morning. We'd love for you to just hang with us a few more minutes, because we want to get highly practical. And we want to take some of these thoughts and bring them down to a practical level within business and personal. And so we're going to kind of create this fireside chat. Imagine that you are in our family room around a fireplace, and join us for a conversation for a few moments. Again, you can see my name, but I'm Chris Allen. I represent the business consulting division within Ronald Blue Trust, where we work with business owners, business leaders to, one, determine purpose, to then really maximize value in the organization, and then preserve legacy. And we do that through obviously coming alongside these leaders in a very practical way. But then Carrie serves individuals. And so we're going to touch on practical aspects of remaining mission true in your business and in your personal lives over the next few moments. But let me start with this. I know and again, my background is in building cultures and working with people. And so I apologize, but I've got to go at this from a psychology and sociology perspective. Because when VUCA hit, VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a term used by the US military when the unexpected happens. And if there's ever been a year of unexpected, it's this year, VUCA. So we live in a world of VUCA where things just don't go as planned. And I don't know about you, but when I read the Bible, there's not a whole lot that goes as planned. Now, it goes according to God's plan, but I think oftentimes we have a plan that doesn't quite happen that way. And so when things go as unplanned, it creates stress and anxiety in the human brain. The amygdala gets fired off, and all of these hormones are released: cortisol, adrenaline, another name for that, if you are medically inclined, epinephrine and norepinephrine. And these hormones in your brain create a stress reaction. And that stress reaction is fear. And that is manifest in you freezing as an individual. You are like want to fight somebody, or you're running from something. So in this year, when we think about leadership, both I'll speak to a business, remaining mission true was so difficult because in an emotional response to what we're seeing all around us, you react in an emotional way. And so emotion actually, it takes the functioning of your practical brain away. This frontal cortex is where you make rational, practical, strategic decisions. And so what's happening is in the midst of VUCA, business leaders are making emotional decisions, and emotional decisions can manifest themselves in, man, I had to do what was right. And to Peter's point, it's like, hey, I'm spinning out of control. I'm pivoting. I'm dizzy. I just need to make an emotional decision about the business right now. What do we need to do? And those might not be the most rational or aligned with mission. The next thing is funding. Peter talked about funding. You make decisions about your business around money, finances, PPP loans, or whatever it might be, in an emotional way rather than connected to the mission, strategic, rational. And then the last one obviously was Peter talked about decision making. And so all of those can be affected really by emotional decisions in our brain that are created by the environment around us. So the point is, how do you put some strategic, practical boundaries around decision making and thinking and around employees and around the culture of an organization so you remain mission true? And again, that's from a business perspective. But Carrie, we also have kind of how this affects personal decisions around finances. I'd love for you to share.
Yeah, Chris, staying mission true, it is really critical in our family's personal side. So our clients want to see their family stay true to those critical family values, like working hard and being generous and being a wise steward. And it's really hard to do. I loved your passions of the first generation become the preferences of the second generation and become irrelevant to the third. We don't want to see that happen in our families. And so it's really critical to focus on staying mission true in a family.
Yeah. So let's give a few practical pointers. And I'm going to keep this really simple. And Peter, I'd love for you to just sort of join this fireside chat. If you have kind of any thoughts, anything from your organization, any practical stories or examples. But we're going to give 5 practical pointers around business and associate those with 5 practical pointers around personal finances, and just have a conversation. Here's the first one. The first one that I would say is, in the business environment, you have to connect the individual's work with the mission or with the purpose of the organization. So let me give you a couple examples. I have to know how my work actually impacts the mission of the organization. It's not enough to just read the words on the wall of a conference room or when I walk into an office and I think, oh, hey, this is the declaration that was made by the founder of this organization. If I don't know how that mission connects with what I do every day, I miss out. So let me give you a couple highly practical examples. One would be the Boston Red Sox. So the Boston Marathon bombing happened in the middle of a season, a baseball season. And I apologize if we don't have anyone who cares anything about the Boston Red Sox. Just full disclosure, I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, so I don't even care about the Sox. But they went from the worst season in a long time to then winning the World Series because the team rallied around a deep purpose for the city of Boston. It became more than just baseball. It became about a city. The same thing happened in Las Vegas. After the shooting that occurred at that concert, you had a brand new hockey team that all of a sudden became great because they rallied around a purpose. And I know I've given you some sports examples. Let me give you a real business example. My son is 16 and is kind of interning with a law firm here in town. And he came home one day and he said, Dad, I know what I'm supposed to be doing every day, but I don't really know what the company does. Now, the company is trying to transform the way loans are closed and people get funding for their largest purchase of their lives. And my son just has a small part to play in that, but nobody ever explained how his part impacted the greater purpose of the organization. So my pointer around business would be, help every individual in your company understand how their specific work every day affects the mission and the purpose of the organization, because it's in that motivation and performance increases. Carrie, how about from a personal side?
Yeah, on the personal side, let me go really, really kind of street level, really granular, because when we think about our personal finances, we need to have purpose for each of the different components of our wealth. You know, for example, Chris, my short-term emergency savings reserves, it has a very different purpose than my kids' college savings, which is different than my retirement savings purpose. So once we have a clear purpose or goal for each of these components of our savings, then I can determine, how much growth I want to aim for, how much risk I want to take, how much liquidity I need. And there we see the danger of not having a clearly defined purpose is that I could take more or less risk than I should take, and ultimately it can reduce the likelihood of me achieving my personal financial goals. So that's one way to make sure to really focus on purpose on your personal balance sheet.
Yeah. Peter, I'd be interested in just your comments around this. Obviously, you talked earlier about the changes at Hope International, staffing, but you've got people all over the world. And, people on the call right now or who are watching might think, well, it's easy to connect people to a mission when you're doing something so profound, like, funding entrepreneurs all over the place. But yet I know from experience that regardless whether you're a church, a nonprofit, or a business, it's still difficult to connect people to the mission. How have you seen that play out?
Yeah, the piece that comes to mind, Chris, is just the importance of simplicity. And I don't think that's just because we're a global organization. We have about 750 full-time staff around the world, multiple languages, multiple time zones. And so if it's not simple, it's not memorable. And so really making sure that is piece. The second is the use of celebration. I think celebration is a powerful tool for all kinds of organizations. So when you gather together, what are the stories that you tell and what are the celebrations? And so when we gather together, there was an intentional effort to say, here is success. This is what we're all about. Telling the stories, celebrating the stories, and keeping it simple are real helpful.
Love it. Love it. All right, let's go to number 2. Number 2, highly practical tip, be transparent. And the comment here for business owners, business leaders, is be transparent when it's difficult to be transparent. Vulnerability develops trust. And all of the research shows that when people are in a stressful place, when their minds are anxious, which is true of every one of us. I mean, think about it. All of a sudden, we're all working from home. Kids are home. Schools are closed. We're trying to figure out how to balance work with noise in the background. You might see some kid walk across those windows behind me in a few moments, but it's like, how do we keep all of this going in the midst? But this idea of being transparent is that probably one of the most important things we can do as leaders is to be predictable. So let me give you a couple examples. I think that you have a lot of employees who are asking, hey, how is my business doing? How are they doing financially? Will I have a job? What's going to happen to my bonus this year? And in the absence of information, people make up stories. And so that's how rumors begin. People begin whispering to each other, trying to figure out what's actually happening. And so part of being transparent as a leader is to be predictable. Hey, friends, I'm going to give you as much information as I can about where our business is or where our church is or nonprofit or whatever organization you're a part of. Here's where we are. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. I don't know when we're coming back. I don't know when we're going to get a grip on this coronavirus. I don't know what's going to happen, but here's what I do know. One other practical example just in life. When we can predict for people what's going to happen, it actually allows them to relax in the other moments. So if people don't know what's going on, they're stressed all the time. But last week, actually it was 2 weeks ago, I got an alert on my phone. And the alert said, flash flood warning in Charlotte. And now that warning tipped me off to, oh man, I didn't realize what was going to happen. But because I got that warning, I don't spend the other hours of my day worrying about flash floods. I don't spend my time anxious about how this flood's going to take out my house. I trust the warning sign. And just like a tornado alarm, we trust in those signs, which allows us to relax and to do our work in a free way. So leaders, I want to encourage you, be transparent, because in the transparency, you will actually allow people to do their best work, knowing that they can trust you're going to give them some warning signs. So that would be from a business perspective. Carrie, take it personal for us.
Yeah, transparency around money is so important within families. I think about when we have adult children, right? They often are wondering about their parents' finances. Now, they may not ask us specifically a question, but they have them. I mean, they want to know what's the plan if something unexpected happens to mom or dad. So it's very important to be transparent and intentionally communicate the parents' plans in an age appropriate manner, right? So I'll give you an example. We conducted a family conference recently, and we did this where the parents have some kids that are in their sort of early 30s, and the kids are asking questions. They're asking of each other, and Chris, as you said, in the absence of information, they're making up some stuff, right? And so we got the family together, and we actually went through their estate plan. Like, what are some specific things are going to happen if something unexpected, untimely happens to mom or dad? So who's going to be the executor? And, why did mom and dad choose the second son, not the first son? How are assets going to be allocated? You're not getting all of it. A good bit's going to charity. So we didn't mention specific amounts, but we made sure that the children understood their parents' wishes and their thinking. We were transparent in that. And what it did was it allowed the parents and the children to have this conversation and talk through some hard things while they can. The last thing we want to do is see that happen after the parents are gone. And again, the kids wrestle with, why did mom and dad do this? So being transparent around critical issues like what happens if something happens to us is really important within a family.
Yeah. Peter, any thoughts? And I see your head go down and you start jotting notes. So then I think, oh, he's got something brilliant he wants to share.
No, I'm jotting notes of things that I want to apply from the two of you. So that's what I'm doing. But, one thing that does come to mind on this was just, especially this year, the ability to communicate with clarity to the global team. And so we created a different sort of dashboard this year that really looked at, for us, again, the work that we do. We anticipated 3 different scenarios of fundraising, how that was going to be impacted. We looked at 3 different scenarios of the need of the global entrepreneurs. Essentially, when there's a lockdown, the entrepreneurs, we gave grace periods. And so that significantly impacts cash flow. And anyway, there was 5 factors that we looked at that gave us a gap. Here's the gap that we have that going into this year, and based on the different scenarios. And 2 things that did. One, trust goes up when information flows clearly, right? So there was, this is the reality. And don't spend all the time worrying about this. We used, is this a blizzard? Is it winter? Or is it an ice age? The 3 different scenarios. And don't worry about the ice age yet, because this is where we are in our pieces. So that was the first piece that it did. But the second piece is it allowed staff to participate. Staff participated in 2 ways. We've never had more staff that contributed to the mission of Hope International directly. And 2, we've never had this crazy thing happen where everyone felt like they were fighting to cut their budgets so that more money could flow to the families that we serve, because they saw that direct connection. We need to get more money to the field right now. This is hard for us. It is way harder for the families living in near poverty levels around the world. And so it allowed people to say, well, we can postpone this. We can not do this. We can more efficiently do that so that more funds can go to the field. And these numbers just they changed as a result of transparent, clear communication with the global team. And I don't ever want to go back to not having that level of candor, that level of open sharing of some of our key metrics in a very summary and actionable way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think you triggered one thought before I move on, but I think the fear in both individual families, to Carrie's point, and the fear in business leaders is, if I'm transparent, people will use it against me. And my kids will use the information against me, or it won't be helpful for them, or my employees will use it against me. I don't want to give them too much information. And the reality is, I've never actually seen that played out. Again, there might be some things you can't share. To Carrie's point, there might be some financial information you don't want to share, amounts or whatever. There may be some financial information inside of a business that you can't share with employees, but share as much as you can and trust that the information will actually be helpful in remaining mission true. And I think that's how I'll wrap that. Let's move on to number 3, third practical point. And here's the statement that I want to make. I've used it before with some companies that we work with, but recognize and reward what you want to see reproduced. Recognize and reward what you want to see reproduced. Here's a practical example. If I want to reinforce the mission of my organization, then I need to find ways of publicly recognizing and rewarding employees who are behaving in a way that's in alignment with the mission. The same thing would be true of values. If I've got values written on the walls of my organization, am I reinforcing and rewarding people who are behaving in a way or displaying those values in their behaviors? And what happens is, even at a subconscious level, when human beings see what certain people are being recognized and rewarded for, they start acting that way. They don't even know what's happening, but you can transform a culture by simply recognizing and rewarding certain behaviors that are in alignment with mission. So a couple practical examples. If you have team meetings within your business, you need to be carving out time to recognize people with very, very specific examples of how they have modeled behavior that's in alignment with the mission. And again, I'm not saying you have to give them money or a gift card or some prize. Just public verbal affirmation is oftentimes enough. Another practical example that I would give you is I was on staff at Movement Mortgage, a large mortgage company in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we had a mission that we exist to love and value people by leading a movement of change in our industry, corporate cultures, and our communities. So what does it look like to lead a movement of change in our communities? Well, communities is international. And so through a foundation connected to the organization, we started encouraging employees to go on what we were calling vision trips. Really, it was just a way of putting a different spin on a mission trip. But the organization was actually kind of funding the first $500 of any employee who wanted to go on one of these vision trips. So a very tangible reward and reinforcement of the kind of behavior that the organization wanted to see and wanted to reproduce. Hey, we want to encourage people to give back and to go and serve because we want to be a movement of change in our communities. So again, just a couple practical examples of recognize and reward what you want to see reproduced. Carrie, how does that apply to personal finances?
Yeah, our clients have strong values around money and hard work, generosity, and they want to see these values continue. But we struggle with encouraging these values in the next generation. And so let's say, Chris, you'd like to encourage your children to make wise financial decisions around just some simple basic building blocks: savings, giving, and spending. Okay, so one idea is to create a program to incentivize these behaviors in your children, just like you're talking about on to recognize and reward it, right? So you could develop a plan where you say, all right, children, you could start it at the end of this year, and you could say, we're going to give you some specific goals around savings. We'd like to see each of you save $1,000 and be able to put it in a separate savings account for emergency reserves. We'd like to see you have a plan for spending. In other words, we'd like to see you have a budget. So we're going to work on that together. And then we'd like to encourage generosity. So we'd like to reward you and recognize you for giving away, at least $500. So you set these goals up early in the year, and then you tell the kids, if they achieve these goals over the course of this year, then you know what, at Thanksgiving, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at what you've accomplished, and we're going to reward you with, I've had parents do $2,000, we've had parents do $5,000 to reward them. And it's a great way to just, these kinds of structures help our children understand the responsibilities that come with our blessings. And it helps reinforce those wise behaviors that we want to see as parents. I mean, after all, what gets celebrated gets repeated. So let's celebrate those wise money habits. Yeah. And just in case you're like me and I'm trying to figure out if I would ever just give my kid $1,000 or $5,000. It could also be $20. So Peter, I love. It could, but it needs to be meaningful or they're going to ignore you. So meaningful for your children, whatever that is. You're absolutely right. Peter, I want to give some space for you to, if you have any thoughts or within Hope or within your family, any thoughts on this?
I mean, the one thought that comes to mind is just how limited I am in seeing the ways that different members of the team live out the mission and have those moments. And so we use a staff software called 15.5, and it's fantastic. We've just been so fortunate to have it because it connects all of our activities to the mission. But the other thing that it does is it has an opportunity where you can essentially use a tag for individuals that are living out part of our corporate culture. And so we have a clear culture. It's the acronym PASSION. And so every time we have a staff meeting, we read through some of those nominations, and on the chat roll or Zoom, or if people are not there, we send other things. And it's just a way of recognizing. And we do, we do a gift card that is inconsequential in the overall budget of Hope International, but so consequential because it creates a small and a fun way for us to be on the lookout. Where are we seeing the culture, the values, the mission being lived out? Where are people going above and beyond? And let's see that. Let's celebrate that. Let's recognize that. And just watching this team celebrate each other is just so much fun. So there's a technology component of it, of the 15.5, that makes it real easy. And there's a practice aspect of it in staff meetings that it's a fun part. That's how we close every single staff meeting.
Love it. Love it. That's a highly practical tip. Again, you have a software 15.5. You can go do some research on that. Let me also tell you, you could make it really organic. You could have an email address connected in your business where people are just emailing in stories of connection to the mission. I know that I've been a part of an organization where we celebrated raving fans and we rewarded people with that idea. So thank you so much. All right, let's move to number 4. We've got 2 left for you. Hang with us. Number 4, create rituals. And I know because of my friendship with Peter that he's got some of these established within his organization and has recommended this with other organizations. But create rituals. Here's what I mean by this. You have a mission in place. I'm working with an organization right now whose mission is to cultivate growth. Now, you can see that as pretty simple, but here's what this company is. They are a landscape company. And so the mission is to cultivate growth. We developed that mission with them, and then we want to tie that into everything that's going on inside the organization. So one of the rituals we put in place is with the development of their field staff. They call them gardeners, not laborers, gardeners. And they gave little patches that can go on the actual vest of the gardeners. And as they improve skills or gain new skills in what sort of equipment or what sort of jobs or maintenance they can take on, they get patches. Almost like, for those, I'm dating myself, but go back to like Awanas, and you get like, you have your vest and you get all the little buttons and patches and stuff. Yep, I'm one of those guys. I remember like Bible memory verses and stuff. But the ritual, you think my employees won't actually connect with that. And what I have seen over and over is that all adults are simply grown children. And we love that gamification. We love the rituals that connect. Maybe it's even the public praise and affirmation. And so I'll stop there. But even some crazy stories that I've heard of, like having trophies for stuff, and people get to keep the trophy on their desk for a certain amount of time. I talked with one company, working with one company this week. They were telling me about this Capital Cup that they have. And each year there's all these sporting events that people compete for. And within the organization, they have a putting contest and all these silly things inside their office. And the winner takes home the Capital Cup. And so again, how are you connecting these rituals to the mission? Peter, I'm going to go to you first. I know that I've heard you talk about rituals before. Any comments about this within your organization?
Yeah, I think, Chris, the piece that you said that really resonated was, in some ways, the fear is this hokey? Is this these are grown adults around the world, and what's the right thing to do? And I think the piece for me is there have been certain rituals that we've tried that did not work. And so I think we do rituals not for the sake of rituals. We do rituals for the sake of alignment of mission. So there's got to be this a little bit of playfulness and a little bit of proper assessment to say, does this work? Is it accomplishing or not? And if you go into that, it gives you this freedom and flexibility to say, we're going to try something for a limited amount of time. And if it works, we're going to keep it. And if not, that's okay too. So time-bound experiments to say, do they work? And it's like the sifting. Then eventually you get a couple things that really are the anchors of who you are and how you operate. And I think that this year has been a great year. There are a lot of disruption, a lot of sifting to say what still makes sense in terms of the habits and rituals. And for us, Chris, again, it's probably different than many that are joining us, but our habit and ritual of having time to pray together as a global team and to be led by our global staff, that is a ritual that is so significant and profound. And there's a wonderful way that we're reminded on a regular basis, we're in this together. We are brothers and sisters united in Christ in the work that we do. And that is a ritual that is so meaningful. So the habit of praying together, the habit of doing celebrations. We have several Employee of the Year. We celebrate milestones. And I would say that our intentionality of how we celebrate these, we used to do them when we're all together. Now we do them as part of a global staff meeting. And so more people participate, and we do these, surprise cakes, try to show up, get them, by someone in the office that at that moment bursts in with the, cake and a chance to celebrate where we can't be physically proximate. We still can be intentional about recognition and celebration. So that's a habit and a discipline that has actually altered this year. And I think it's we now have more of the global team able to experience that when we don't just do it the one time that we have a subset of the staff gathering together. So all that to say, have fun with it, like flexible, creative, time-bound, keep what works, and don't think that a ritual means we do this on year one, therefore we've got to do this for the 50th year. No, you're going to find what works, what's sticky, and hold on to those things and let go of the ones that actually don't accomplish the goal of the rituals, which is a deeper connection to the mission and a deeper connection to each other.
That's great. It triggered just a memory in my head as we moved to more personal application. I grew up in the Chicago area, and one of the sort of missions of the Allen family was we want to stay connected. We want to do fun things. But my dad was a pastor for 43 years, so it didn't always involve expensive connections. But one of our rituals was to go and cut down a Christmas tree just after Thanksgiving. And the ritual was really fun until I realized like how perfectionistic my dad was about picking a tree. And it used to drive me nuts because it would take like 2 hours to find a stupid tree in a field. And so the Allen family now, my Allen family, has taken that ritual, and I've cut that time down to like 10 minutes by just like, hey kids, does this tree look good? We're good, get it. And so, you have to be willing to change these rituals over time, but we're still accomplishing the mission. We're staying mission true. Carrie, give us some other concepts around rituals as it applies to sort of personal finances.
Yeah, sure. So let's say that generosity is an important value for you and your family. Well, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. So at Thanksgiving, you could give your children some money that they can then, and the challenge is this, you can't spend it on yourself. We want to see you give it away to someone else in need, or someone else, many others in need. So whether it's $50 or in your house, Chris, maybe $10, maybe it's $500, gather that, pass it out over Thanksgiving, and then tell your kids, you know what, over Christmas dinner, when we get back together, we're going to share stories with how you gave it away. So that's one simple ritual. Another is we play this at my house around Thanksgiving because we want to encourage and reinforce a spirit of thankfulness. And so we not only play it often at Thanksgiving, but we try to do it periodically through the year where we go around and say one thing at the dinner table that we're thankful for, right? And you go, I say one thing, my son says one thing, you keep going. And we see how long we can keep this up, right? And it's just a fun little way to reinforce the value of being thankful for God's blessings that He's given us.
Love that. Thank you. All right, let's go to our last one. And I'm kind of watching our time, and I hope that you guys are hanging with us here. Here's the last one. The last one is simply serve. And I think that, from a biblical standpoint, when we take ourselves out of just what's in it for me, and we begin to think about other people, it moves us into this place of mission true, like remaining mission true. And I was actually, I'm going to share this morning. I was reading last week, and it just caught me in James chapter 3. There's a section in my Bible that's titled Two Kinds of Wisdom. It's James 3, starts in 13 and goes to 18. But here's what I want to point out. It says, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have selfish ambition and envy, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. And the reason that stuck out to me is that I think one of the greatest issues in mission drift is when we as individuals start focusing on ourselves, that it becomes about my bitter envy or my selfish ambition. And I believe one of the greatest practical practices that we can play out in the workplace is to serve, because serving takes us out of this place of me, and into how can I serve other people? Another way of saying it would be, how can we be generous? And generous is not just money. The definition of generous by a project done at Notre Dame is the giving of good things. And that could be money, that could be time, that could be information, that could be wisdom, that could be knowledge, that could be help. And so I want to kind of practically encourage the cultures, one way to remain mission true is to serve, because it takes the individual out of what's in it for them into what's in it for the team. And Carrie, I know that that is also practical within our families, and particularly related to finances. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, serving together, it is a great way to invest in family relationships. That's what's eternal, right? So investing together, it can reinforce these family values. So when the kids are living at home, you can do a quarterly service project together. When the kids move out, you can use family gathering holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Easter, and they can be great times to get the family together and serve when you're all in town. Some examples that we've seen families do together is serve at a soup kitchen, work in a community garden. We did that with my family before it got too cold. Buy and box Christmas gifts for needy families. We have a lot of clients and friends that are doing that right now with Operation Christmas Child, or even doing yard work for an elderly neighbor. These are all ways that you can get together as a family and serve and laugh and work hard. And it's just a wonderful way to invest in those important relationships.
So it made me think, I mean, we've got the leader of a nonprofit organization that serves all over the world. And yet I know from experience in organizations, you can get disconnected from that, even in an organization with a mission that is to serve. Peter, love to hear just some of your thoughts on this.
The one thought that just comes to mind is, especially for leaders, you could make a time efficiency argument that would say it doesn't make any sense for you in the workplace to spend time doing these menial tasks. It just that's inefficient when you look at what you're doing and how much you're paid per hour, and you could make an efficiency argument for why that doesn't make sense. I completely agree with you, Chris and Carrie. The power, though, of a leadership model that follows in the way of Jesus, that says, I am here to serve. I would argue that the efficiency argument is blown away by the good that happens when a leader takes the example and creates a culture of truly like, we're going to follow in the way of Jesus. And today it just would be weird if you're in the workplace and you're like, hey, I'd like to wash your feet today. That just would be weird. And that doesn't translate. It worked back then because that was something that was the most menial of tasks. Today, I think the question is, what's the most menial of tasks? And are there moments when we say position, that doesn't matter. I am here to serve and to symbolically, in some ways, I mean, Jesus didn't spend all his time washing feet. That was a particular moment for a very important message about the different nature of the way of Jesus, as opposed to the way of the world that says high power and high authority for my own good. And so I just think the question for all of us is, what are those places at home and in the workplace that should appropriately turn heads of saying, why are you doing that? So I don't know if it's the plugged toilet detail or whether it is the trash detail, but I think there is a powerful example when we roll up our sleeves and literally, not just figuratively, do the dirty work. I think that shapes culture and gets all of us. This is not about how can you serve me? This is for all of us. The focus is external. The focus is outward. And those are the most vibrant and healthy workplaces with the greatest loyalty of the team and with the greatest true we're in this together type camaraderie.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do a recap here, but I'm just going to give a couple seconds for people to, if you have a question for any of us on this screen, if you want to make a comment, use the Q&A function, type something in, we'll get to it. We're kind of wrapping this thing up. The one thing that I wanted to, or I guess, Peter, you triggered a thought. Remember that landscape company that I mentioned? I talked with the owner actually yesterday, about requiring that every leader, every office personnel be required to go out into the field for 1 day a year and serve as a gardener. May we never forget where the money is made in this business. The money is made in the field. And whatever practical application that might be for you, your organization, that's what it means to serve. And I thought that was great. So here's a recap. Number one, connect individuals' work to the purpose. And again, these are 5 practical ways that you can remain mission true, even in this crazy environment that we're in right now. Connect individuals' work to the purpose. Number 2, be transparent. Number 3, recognize and reward what you want to see reproduced. Number 4, create rituals. And last but not least, serve. And so those 5 practical tips. I'll just pause there. Carrie, anything you want to add? Peter, anything you want to add? Any questions that have come up? Any comments, thoughts? I'll just let it breathe for a second.
Yeah, I'll just say, if you're not doing these things, to what we said earlier, now is a great time to start. You know, pick 1, pick 2, 3 of these things, and let's do it. We've got a brand new year ahead of us. People are looking for encouragement. They're looking for us to do things differently than we've done this year. And so let's take advantage of that in our families.
Peter, any parting comments of wisdom from Professor?
No, I think Carrie, that's the best ending note, is the danger for all of us, right? We just spend an hour and a half together on in this conversation, and I know your calendars are probably like mine, is we're going to be jumping into the next thing and continuing to run hard throughout the day. And so for me, it's like that. I'm not joking, Chris, when you asked before, I'm writing down the concrete things that I'm going to do differently as a result of this. So I think for all of us, a meeting was not productive if it does not result in action. So what's the action that we're taking away? 1, 2, or 3 things that we can do differently today or in the days to come.
All right. So if there aren't any final questions or comments, I'm going to pass this thing and the baton. Remember that picture that Peter showed of the race? Passing the baton to Evan.
Wow. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Lots of rich content. I'd also like to thank our attendees for investing the last hour and a half. I'm going to be brief, so just hang with me for about another 60 seconds. But we've heard a lot of valuable information today from Peter and Chris and Carrie, and it's likely that you've heard a lot of valuable information as well. And maybe you picked up an idea, or you heard about a resource, or you've determined that you need some help. We would invite you to reach out to your Ron Blue Trust advisor, whether it be through email or phone, or by responding to this. And we would just ask that you would reach out and connect with us. We'd also ask that you would complete a survey that's going to follow this message. So immediately from here, you're going to get a survey, and we'd invite you to complete that. And then finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Ronald Blue and Company CPAs. Peter, thank you for your great investment today. And with that, I'd just like to close in prayer, and then we'll conclude today's virtual meeting. Father God, thank you for your providence. Thank you for providing. Thank you, Lord, for just this great content. God, thank you for our attendees and our organization that we're able to serve with these extra things that we get to do. God, we are blessed by this content. Thank you for everyone here. And God, we just ask that you would go before us in how we work, how we lead, and how we communicate. And Lord, help us to apply these practical things to our organizations and our families. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.